to make sustainable tourism happen, and also how we need to think about measurement to ensure that we can do this kind of research. So it's a bit of a medley, if you want. Let's start with the problem. The problem is climate change, and I love this quote here: "We're on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator." It's the latter that's the problem. We still have our foot on the gas pedal. The tourism industry, I don't need to tell you, is responsible for 10% of all GDP and 1 in 10 jobs. So the easiest solution is to say, let's just stop tourism. That's a fantastic contribution to mitigate climate change, but that's in nobody's interest, right? Tourism industry is just important, too important to us. But we need to know that it's very unsustainable. So just a few key facts: 8% of all global CO2 emissions, 300 liters of water per guest per night. Now, that doesn't mean people are showering like crazy, but by the time you have pools, you have landscape gardens, you have laundry, all of this adds up to that amount, which is a crazy amount if you think of destinations that are actually short of water. And we generate 35 million tons of solid waste every single year. So a lot to improve in the tourism industry. And the IPCC says if we can change behavior, we can actually make a massive difference to these greenhouse emissions. But of course, changing behavior is not as easily said as done. And then we have the Global Sustainable Development Goals. And I was fascinated. It's always said sustainable production and consumption. That's goal number 12. But more recently, at least, I don't know if they added it or if I've just found it more recently, but there's a specific aim in there that actually says we should develop and implement tools to monitor sustainable development impacts for sustainable tourism. So very, very important. We need to measure it if we want to change it. All right. So what do we urgently need? We need many different, what we call behavior change interventions. So there are practical measures that we can deploy in destinations, in hotels, anywhere tourism, that can entice consumers to behave more sustainably. And you will see why I use the word entice specifically. Because what we're currently doing is we're trying to make them, we're trying to guilt trip them. That's a hard one to translate. We're trying to make them feel so guilty that they change their behavior, but that is not a very promising way of doing it. So it really is about enticing them, make it attractive for them to behave in sustainable ways. And we need some kind of automatic measurement so that when we develop all these interventions, we can quickly know whether they're effective or not. Well, and of course, we can monitor time. So if I'm a hotel and I want to know how's my environmental performance, if I have an automatic system, I can just keep monitoring how my performance develops. Now, I want to give you a few examples quickly. Each one of those examples, I could talk for an hour, but I want to just give you a little taste of the kinds of examples, how we can do interventions to change behavior. First, we want to measure it, right? So we want to know what's happening. So this was a little study we did about towel use in hotels. And all we did is we measured the towels and we looked at the guest mix. And what you see here is a regression. So everything that's gray is significant. Everything that goes to the right is positively associated with more towel use. And you can immediately see the kids are always the problem. So as soon as there's kids in the room, the towels skyrocket. You can see that corporate guests are not a problem at all. So business tourists, they're actually not tourists, right? For them, it's just normal life. And as a result, they're actually not particularly badly behaved in terms of towel use. And then this makes me a little bit proud because I'm Slovenian. The Slovenians are very, very happy to reuse their towel, but it just goes to show that there are differences in different countries of origin, and that's true for all behaviors. And no country is good or bad. You will see for different behaviors, this will vary. All right, now let's have a look at a few interventions. Very famous study published in Journal of Consumer Research. So whoever says you can't publish tourism work in top journals in other fields, tell them about this paper. So it was a towel reuse study, and the most most effective experimental condition was a little pin. People got a pin when they signed a pledge at the hotel reception that they would reuse their towels. Yeah. And then they were running around with the pin in the hotel, and they were showing off their, environmentally responsible behavior. Well, that was very effective. And it was the combination of the pledge, the commitment, and the social visibility of the pin that was so very powerful. And they reduced towel use by 40%. And you can only imagine how much cost saving. And you will see this is a pattern through all the studies I will tell you about. Through all the studies, what we aspire to is we never reduce guest satisfaction. We try to reduce the cost for the hotel because we need the hotel's buy-in. If it costs the hotel a lot of money, they're not going to do it. And obviously, we want to improve the environmental impact. So we're looking for a win-win-win situation with every intervention we develop. And you see here, it's beautiful, great environmental impact, cost savings, and no impact on guest satisfaction. People couldn't care less. They quite enjoyed running around with their little pin. Taking it to the next level is to saying, well, it's not just about the towel, right? It's also about the whole room clean, because every room clean means 1.5 kilowatt hours of electricity, 35 liters of water, 100 milliliters of chemicals. So we went to a Slovenian hotel, Bohin Eco Hotel, and we started an intervention. It looked like this. First, we knew what's the baseline. Baseline, 3%. So if we do nothing, 3% put the sign out to say, I don't need my room cleaned. All right, that's not very much. Then we said, if you're going to have your room, if you waive your room clean, we will give you a free drink. But this was not just the usual bribery. Now, you will see that paper is from 2010. So that's a long time ago. It wasn't so common at that time. But what we did was not just give them a drink. We basically leveraged some qualitative research insights that told us that people are very skeptical. If you say, waive the room clean, people say, well, the hotel's only doing it to save money. So we were quite proactive about this, and we said, yes, you're absolutely right. If we do this, if you waive a clean, we save, let's say, 10 euros. But what we are proposing is we split it in the middle, and you get half in the shape of a drinks voucher, and we save half as well. And that was a narrative, a message that worked really, really well with the hotel guests. And so this narrative reduced room cleaning by 42%. Absolutely massive cost saving for the hotel. You can only imagine how much they saved on this. Now, very interesting, and this is theoretically interesting, is that when we added, I forgot to say, not only were the guests not unhappy, they loved it. It was like a black market for drinks vouchers, right? So absolutely no sacrifice in guest satisfaction. But the theoretically interesting thing is that when we added a message about sustainability, absolutely nothing is added, right? So this message that we see everywhere in hotels that tell us about the consequences of our behavior on the planet, all of our experiments, we add that condition, and never ever does it work, right? So really important to realize, in the space of tourism where people come for enjoyment, it's extremely difficult to try to talk to them about the greater good and the planetary health and their grandkids. They're in an enjoyment mindset. So leveraging anything with enjoyment is likely to be much more effective than making them feel guilty about the environmental impact of their behaviors. All right, a much simpler room cleaning study we did also in a Slovenian hotel. In this case, it was a business hotel. Now, you remember that's quite a different ball game, because business people are not there for enjoyment. They are there because, they sleep in the hotel, they're in meetings during the day. So it's quite a different setup. So what we did here is a classic nudging strategy. So we changed the default. The original default is every single day, there is a free room clean automatically in the hotel. So we change that and say, look, we are not cleaning your room every day by default, but if you would like to put the sign out and request a clean, we will be absolutely delighted to do it. Importantly, no money is flowing, right? So you're not getting a refund for not having the room cleaned, but you're also not paying for the extra room. It's just a swap of the default. And that little change reduced room cleaning by 63%. And again, you can only imagine the hotel never changed. They kept the system because it saved them a gigantic amount of money. And again, the guests are not dissatisfied because they're gone, right? They're not, it's not that the beach is sandy and the room is dirty. They're just there to sleep. They're in meetings all day. So very, very, very simple way for a win-win situation to be achieved in the context of room cleaning. All right, let's move on to plate waste. I am very passionate about plate waste. Food, the entire food production system is responsible for 26% of all carbon emissions. Food waste alone is responsible for 6% of all carbon emissions. So it's an absolutely gigantic problem. And in tourism, it's particularly problematic because a lot of what we're doing is buffet service. Now, what happens at buffets? People go to the buffet. People get all excited by all the many foods. They take as much as they possibly can, and then they can't eat it up. And that leftover food on the plate is called plate waste. And that's a real disaster. It's a disaster because there's nothing we can do with that food. We can't donate it. Some hotels compost, that's better than nothing. But in most instances, it goes in landfill. And when it goes in landfill, it further produces methane, a very powerful greenhouse gas. And so in tourism, what we need to remember, because we are an enjoyment industry, right? The enjoyment for the guest is not a consequence of wasting the food. The enjoyment for the guest is the consequence of eating the food, taking it and eating it. So plate waste doesn't add enjoyment. It's totally unnecessary. It's just a financial burden on the hotel and a massive environmental burden. Sorry, long intro. So basically, I'm passionate about reducing plate waste, especially when it's unnecessary, right? And what you see here again is a regression study. So we went to a Slovenian hotel and we only measured every single day how much waste is generated by uneaten food in the breakfast buffet area. And then we have a few pieces of information every day. And 3 buffets is an interesting one. So whenever we have lots of guests, they add a 3rd buffet island and a 3rd service island. And then the other ones are self-explanatory. And what can you see? Well, the 3 buffets are the worst disaster. So the moment that 3rd buffet island goes in, the plate waste skyrockets. That's a really good study for someone to undertake. We have 2 possible hypotheses, but we haven't tested it. One is anonymity. So suddenly we have massive numbers of people and your bad behavior is not seen. So you just waste food. The alternative hypothesis could be food abundance. So we can see, oh, there's so much food, must be worth nothing. Let's waste it. But 3 buffet islands, gigantic jump. All right. Here they are again, the kids. Kids always cause trouble. I can tell you that from experience. So in the buffet, they just zoom around the buffet and scoop up everything. And then they say, Mom, I can't finish. And that's exactly what we see here. So if you have younger guests at the buffet, much more plate waste. And again, we have a country of origin effect, right? So in this is a Central European context. And we can see German, Austrian tourists waste very little. The Russian tourists in this particular context waste a lot more food. Now, why do we want to see this? Well, because this gives us a really good idea of what we could change. We could do something about the buffet islands. We could target kids. We could target messages at specific countries of origin. What we decided to do is we went for the kids. And we did something every parent knows works exceptionally well. And that's either stamps or stickers, right? Kids do everything for stamps and stickers. So what you can see here is we had a very, very basic, nowadays everything has to be an app, but actually this is very, very old fashioned. It's a 1 A4 piece of paper and at reception, the family gets it. And then for every day at the dinner buffet, when the entire family eats up, they get a stamp. And if they have a stamp for every single day of their vacation, at checkout, the kids get a little present. Yeah. So very, very simple game, very simple to implement for any hotel. Why did we do it at the dinner buffet? Because at the dinner buffet, each table has a waiter assigned to them. So, you know, they have a relationship with the waiter sees no leftovers, has a stamp in the pocket, and bang, stamps the card. So very low impact in terms of implementing. So the stamp collection game reduced plate waste among families specifically by 38%. Massive cost saving. I think massive. I think we calculated just for July and August in this particular hotel, it was 8,000 euros. And that's just for the segment of families, right? So definitely nothing at the cost of a few A4 pieces of paper and a few stamps. And in terms of enjoyment, the kids absolutely loved it. I mean, loved it. They were devastated when the family decided to go and eat outside of the hotel because they were going to miss their stamp. So they'd go to the waiter the next day and negotiate with them that they ate everything up at the restaurant. They want their stamp. Not only the kids, actually, this was interesting because it was, again, a Central European context. And it was very much in our messaging, was very much in line with the parental messaging of eat everything up that's on your plate. So the kids loved it, but the parents also supported it. So it was kind of working really well at many levels. Now, the single most effective experiment to reduce plate waste, and I'm sad to say it's not mine, but it's, I think, the single best study in nudging in tourism, is plate reduction. So these guys ran this study across 52 hotels in Scandinavia. They took a plate, they reduced it by 3 centimeters, and the result was 20% reduction in plate waste. Now, why is that so very elegant? It's so very elegant because we're not communicating, we're not preaching, we're not messaging, we do nothing else but once replace the plate, all right? And the trick is we're not limiting people's freedom. They can go and get as much food as they want, but what they cannot do is they cannot overfill, right? Often we see people getting greedy and overfilling, but just the little reduction in size means if you're still hungry, you go back, but you don't overfill and then end up not being able to eat. So 20% reduction in food waste. And obviously, this is a massive cost reduction because remember, this is forever. So every day you have 20% less waste. Every day you have to buy 20% less food. And for the environment, every day you have 20% less emissions from methane in landfill. Guests couldn't care less. I mean, of course, they're going to be frustrated if the plate is tiny, but within reason. If you go to some of the fancy hotels, they have like salad bowl-sized breakfast plates. So, you know, there's plenty of space for reduction without making the tourists grumpy. The same team of researchers had another little cute idea. They had this little sign, welcome back again and again. Go back to the buffet as often as you want. And the beauty of this sign is it leverages a theoretical construct called social norms. So again, in qualitative research, they found out that people are embarrassed to be seen to go back to the buffet many times. They look greedy, you know, it just doesn't make them comfortable. So with this little sign, they took that embarrassment away. They said, no, it's fine to go. In fact, we want you to go again. It's much better to go many times than to fill your plate and not eat up. Again, think about it. The cost for the hotel of that sign is probably, I don't know, €1. And the reduction is 21% in food waste every single day of their operations. So very, very effective, very simple way. No guilt, no talking about the planet, just leveraging very, very simple emotions people have when they are in a specific behavioral context. No negative impact on guest satisfaction from this intervention. All right, then we just a few more because this one was really interesting. When you work with industry, things come up that you don't originally plan. So we were debriefing with the hotel about the room opt-out study. And the food and beverage manager said, cotton serviettes, and we had no idea what he's talking about. Well, it turns out that actually these, you know, beautiful white, thick cotton serviettes you get in a nice hotel are very environmentally unfriendly. Cotton production, very water and energy intensive. They can only use those serviettes about 70 times. And every time a guest touches it, it needs to be washed and ironed, dried and ironed, right? So really environmentally, not a very good solution. Again, we did a very simple thing here. We just changed the default. So we replaced the luxury white cotton serviettes with recycled single-use serviettes, right? And that was a bit of a fight because the director of the hotel wasn't very happy. It's a very nice hotel. And the director said, that's not fancy enough, but he let us do it. So we replaced them. But what the condition of the director was, is we had to put a little table sign on the dining tables. And the table signs explained why that change happened. And we made the white serviettes available at the buffet. So if any guest was particularly desperate to have a thick white cotton serviette, then we were able to accommodate that. 95% change, really, frankly, nobody cared. And we even had we integrated a question in the default satisfaction survey the hotel puts out. Absolutely zero impact on guest satisfaction. In fact, in the survey, a few guests commented that they found it quite interesting that they had misjudged the sustainability of the two alternative serviette forms. All right, and I think we have one more. That one is also very cool, not our study, but super, super cool. So all they did is they basically gave feedback to people in the hotel shower, how many liters are flowing through. Now, it obviously wasn't a computer, right? It was just a little display, and no messaging. You're just showering, and you can see the number of liters, yeah? And that little intervention reduced electricity use. So this was not the liters of water, it was the electricity required to heat the shower water. So that electricity was reduced by 11%, absolutely no negative impact on hotel guests. All right, last one, I think, yes, because see, I work with consumers, so my focus is the tourist. But recently this paper was published, which I absolutely loved, and it's a paper that goes backstage into the kitchen. And we have a lot of waste there with food as well. And that's food preparation waste. And this researcher team had a brilliant idea. They just replaced the big intransparent plastic bins that we usually have in kitchens with smaller transparent bins. So you could see through, and they were a lot smaller. That little infrastructure change reduced food preparation waste by 73%. And why, you will ask, why, what's happening? Well, two things are happening. One thing is the cooks are lazy. So when the bin is smaller, they would have to empty it more frequently. And they don't want to do that, right? So they'd rather be a bit more careful in how much things they throw away, then they don't have to go so often to empty the bin. And the transparency of the bin also matters, because the transparency shows that, like, imagine you have the chef running around and there's all the other people chopping and preparing vegetables. And the chef sees that there's half a cucumber in the bin and is very unimpressed, right? So goes back to the chopper and says, why is there half a cucumber? So there's this kind of control effect and the laziness effect. But I mean, it's just beautiful. Think about it. It's probably 50 euros worth of a bin that you swap, and you just have these continuous benefits from it. So really, really lovely example of a nudge. All right, that was the examples. Now, what I hope you can see, but you probably don't, so I will just illustrate this for you, is this is all field experimentation. So these are things we are developing, pre-testing, and then we are going into a real tourism environment to test whether these things work or not. Now, that is labor intensive, it is slow, it is very expensive, and it's random. By random, I mean, we do the experiments with whatever hotel is willing to work with us. So it's very difficult for us to develop systematic knowledge about the circumstances, when something works, when something doesn't work. And just labor intensive, expensive. Think about the stamp game, right? So for the stamp game, that was an experiment that ran over the summer season in Europe. So July and August, I was paying $50 an hour for a research assistant to stand in the kitchen scrape take out the banana peels, take out the serviettes, scrape the meat off the bone, and weigh the waste. Yeah, super expensive, super prone to error, practically unaffordable for most people. You can't go to a PhD student and say, why don't you run this study? Because they just don't have the funds. So we need to do something else. We need to start automatically measuring. And my vision is this. Now, this is a vision. This is not reality, but you've got to have a vision. So the vision is that we have an automatic wireless system that collects all the environmentally relevant data from hotels and gets it to a central database. That gives us a baseline for every hotel. So then when we introduce improvement measures, we can tell whether we can achieve a significant difference or not. Yeah? And of course, what the hotels could also do with this kind of thing is they could benchmark each other. They could say, how am I going compared to other 3-star hotels? So we don't have the system yet, but we have little parts of it. And one part we tried in China. So what we did here is we had a little scale to measure the plate waste in grams per minute. So every time new plate waste comes in, we get a reading. But we also have a people counter on the ceiling, so we can see how many people enter the dining room. So together, that allows us to calculate plate waste per person per meal. And then, so that's our baseline. Now we know how much the baseline is. And now we start doing something. In this case, my PhD student, Oscar, developed 2 table signs. One is about reminding people of the hard work of the farmer for the food and trying to elicit empathy for the farmer. The other one's a bit more of a sledgehammer message. It basically says the chairman endorses the Clean Plate campaign. Clean Plate campaign is actually a Chinese grassroots campaign that comes from the people about food waste. But at some point in history, the chairman said, yep, that's a good idea. And that's exactly the quote, okay? So we tested these 2 different signs initially in a survey, and sadly, the empathy message didn't work at all. Yeah, it didn't really elicit the kind of empathy we needed. So we only tested the chairman in the field, but that was very effective. So you can see the data for the food waste, for the chairman food waste in red, and you can see the data for the baseline in blue, and you can immediately see what a massive difference it is, right? The difference is 7%. Now you're going to say, well, Sarah, that's not a lot. But I'm going to say, do you know what? 7% on every given day in every eatery in China is a lot, right? And the 7% is achieved with a table sign that costs €1. So, you know, for us as behavioral scientists, that's a pretty good outcome. There's nothing much we would complain about. All right, I better hurry up because I want to save a little bit of time for questions. Here's a study we did much closer to home. This is a residential college here at the University of Queensland. 136 rooms, and each room has a manual plug-in heater. And you can only imagine how much this costs the college, right? Because every student can manually switch the heater on or off, and usually they just run it all the time, and it's super expensive. So what we did is we used an automatic measurement system, and it contained 2 parts. It contained a little device that you put into the PowerPoint, and then you plug the heater into the device. And that little device sends us the actual electricity use by the second. So we know exactly how much electricity is used in every single room for every single heater. And the other thing is we have 2 little buttons that are connected to this device that allow the students to control the heater. And we had 2 different conditions. One condition was just on-off buttons. The other condition was a timer. So they press the button, the heater runs for 2 hours, and then it automatically switches off. And as you can see here, 13 rooms. We didn't wire up everything because the gear was quite expensive. 13 rooms were wired up with the timer, and 39 rooms just had the on-off buttons. And now I'll show you the distribution of electricity use. And you can see where the purple rooms are. So you can immediately visually see. We don't need some sophisticated statistical analysis. You can immediately see that electricity use for the rooms with the timer is massively lower than electricity use for the other rooms. In fact, in this case, it's 60% reduction, and the college couldn't believe their eyes, right? In terms of guest satisfaction, we had one single student complain. Everyone else could not care, to the point where we even asked them, would you like to change over and go away from the timer? And the student said, no, we're cool with that. Because what happens? It turns out many of them just forget the heater, right? They go to the lecture all day, heater's running all day. With the timer, they can't forget. So except for one student, no impact on guest satisfaction, but super huge result, both financially and environmentally for the college. A few more little things. Here we have no experiments for you yet, but just want to show you what we can do with automatic measurement, the potential of it, right? So what we went to do here is we measured the electricity use in mini fridges. And it came because I went to a hotel in Cairns, a hotel that has 300 rooms, and every single room has like an apartment-sized fridge. And I thought that is just absolutely insane, right? What if people don't even use it? So we wired up, that's the device we use for the heaters. And we used it also for the minibars. So you plug this into the power point, and then you plug the fridge or the minibar or the heater into this machine, and it transmits the electricity. And then we had this second device. It's a little contact switch. It just shows us when the fridge is open and when it's closed. Yeah. And okay, this is hotel specific, so you don't have to worry. But for this particular hotel, the mini fridges alone cost them $8,000 per year, generated 13 tons of CO2 emissions, and that's without the production of the fridge, the purchase, and the repairs. That's just the running. But this is where I get excited. That's the plot of the data. You see the blue, you see the red. The blue is the electricity use. And you can see the electricity use is almost the same all the time. It varies with temperature. So if someone has, for example, the aircon heating, then the fridge needs more energy. If they have the aircon cooling, the fridge needs less. That's pretty much the only thing that explains that. But the really exciting stuff is in red. So if you see in red, that's the number of times the fridge was opened. And when I saw, this is one particular room, and I think that's pretty scary stuff. At the beginning, you can see there was someone in the room who was really genuinely using the fridge. But from then on, there's practically no use, because the first opening is the cleaner, right? The cleaner's got to open it to check if there's a rotten sandwich in there. So the first open doesn't count. So in most instances, the guest never opened the fridge, or maybe opened it once to see what's inside. That means in this particular room, I would say for 3/4 of the time, we were using all that electricity with absolutely zero guest benefit. So, this for me is a case, it's not an experiment, this is just a measurement, but it's a case where I think, hotel chains, policymakers just need to be a bit more creative and ask themselves, does every room need a fridge? All right, similar, just a little glimpse for the next, for the thing we're currently having a field experiment, very exciting for me, because when you talk to hotels here in Australia, especially small hotels, air conditioning is the single biggest problem they will talk about. So we've just installed these devices. They don't look very attractive, but they also don't look scary. So we pop them on the air conditioner, and it can measure the air conditioner use, even without having to get an electrician, right? You just put it on with double-sided sticky tape. And I wanted to just show you one room. So you see a green line and the blue line. The green line is the outside temperature, so we can see the day and night cycles. And then the blue line is the in-room temperature. And you can see 15 degrees, 15 degrees, 15 degrees. And then some crazy guest comes and cranks it up to 30, right? Then it goes down again and back to 30 and down again. So now we have it. We have the automatic measurement. We are rolling it out across 5 hotels, I think 10 or 15 rooms per hotel. And now we've developed really cute little messages, which we're going to place next to the thermostats and on the rooms. And we're hoping just with those stimuli, we will be able to achieve an improvement. But what I want to show you is the power of automatic measurement, right? Once we've installed this, I am not paying a research assistant $50 an hour. It's all just happening automatically. And we as social scientists or as behavioral economists, whatever you want to call yourself, we can walk in and we can try many different things until we find something that works. All right, good. So just to wrap up, what really we need to do is we need to find the baseline measure optimally using technology. So we know where does a hotel or any organization stand in terms of environmental performance. Then we need to have an intervention. So we change something, and then we need to see whether we have achieved the change. That's really what an experimental setup is about. And that's how we can learn. We can learn cause and effect. We can say with certainty that it was our message, our stamp collection game, our pin, whatever it is, our reduction of plate size that caused the improvement. And here is just, I probably will just show you 2 more slides so we can maybe do some questions. Here's my view of the world. There's no statistics, but from all the experiments and all the reading I've done, I think if we want to entice tourists to behave more sustainably, beliefs are the worst possible thing. So that's what we're currently doing. We're giving them little signs, trying to change their beliefs about how bad, using a fresh towel every day is. We see very, very little effect. Why? Because people want to enjoy themselves on holiday, right? They don't want to sit there and cognitively process our messages. Social norms are more successful. That's peer pressure. So a good example was the sign that says, go back as often as you want. So, or the pin where people show off their behavior. So if we can leverage social norms, much more powerful. Enjoyment, we never do it, but we are in the enjoyment business. So if we can link the behavior we want to display with enjoyment, that's just fabulous. That's gonna work absolutely beautifully. And nudging, that's the change of choice architecture, like reducing plate size, is probably the single most effective thing we can do. But it's not always possible. We need to be aware of that. Last slide is just because this is my view of the world, right? So I've just made this up. There's no numbers behind this, but here are the numbers. So what you should see at the bottom, that's a review article of all field experiments in tourism for sustainability. And at the bottom, you can see the various theoretical constructs that were used to change people's behavior. And then you can see the bars. And the bars tell you how many studies have been conducted using the different things. And then red and green tells you something about the success rate. So you can immediately see the beliefs, single most, various signs telling people things. We always test them. But look at that. We only have 60% success rate, right? Then we add social norms to the beliefs, and we still only have 50% success rate. But then we move to nudging. Nudging, remember, that's reducing plate size, much higher success, but very few studies. So that's really something we want to do more of. And my favorite pet topic is increasing pleasure, increasing enjoyment, because I believe tourism is all about enjoyment. So if we can link the environmental behavior with enjoyment, I reckon that's the winner. That's how everyone wins. Tourists have more fun, we save money, the environment wins. All right, this is the same result in a meta-analysis, but I'll skip that, go straight to the conclusions. So where do we stand? We are nowhere close to the end with this. Despite the fact that we've been studying sustainable tourism since '93, we have very few tangible solutions. So we've got to work harder to find things that work. So much more work needed, plenty of space for PhD students and others. We need more theory-informed practical measures, so we just need to test more different interventions, not another sign, just really out of the square, creative, new, cool ideas, what we could do. We need to improve theory. That sounds a bit provocative, but I personally think that the theories we're mostly using, theory of planned behavior, value belief norm theory, there's nothing wrong with these theories, but they're quite limiting, right? They have a very limited number of theoretical constructs. We want to broaden that. We want to go out. Think of habit, for example. 43% of what we do every day is habit driven, yeah? And yet habit as a construct is in none of those theories. Pleasure as a construct is not in those theories. So we really need to be courageous and try to push the boundaries of theory. Automatic measurement, I think, is indispensable. If we want to be really effective in developing new measures, we absolutely must automatically measure. Otherwise, it's unaffordable. Only the rich researchers can do field experimentation, and that's not how it should be. It should be open to everyone. And finally, it really is, I think, a plea for collaboration with industry. Yeah? We can forever do survey research sitting in our office. But where the rubber hits the road is, if you go to a manager and say, if you implement this thing, this will be the outcome. And if that's what we want to say, we have got to work with industry. So collaboration between researchers in industry is absolutely indispensable. And I think that brings me to the end of what I wanted to share. And I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know if I get to see your faces, but I would be absolutely delighted to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Dorlikar, for this inspiring presentation. Let's move on to the questions from our audience. I think we have 10 minutes just for questions. Let's see. Well, question number 1 says, in room service, there is always a lot of food wasted. Here in Cancun, there are many all-inclusive hotels with cafes, drinks, and beach towels, and that you can change all the time. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's an absolute disaster. I really do think it's an absolute disaster. And I think the question I would ask is the hotel overestimating the value of it, right? Obviously, the intention of providing that service is to increase service delivery. But I think if I would be working with that hotel, I would say, is that really increasing service delivery? You could probably achieve the same aim in a different way. Let's say you want unlimited towers. If you would go and have the towers somewhere where you have to go to a staff member and ask for it, you would still have unlimited towers. But I am absolutely convinced you would halve the use of towers. Yeah. The same with food. I was just chatting yesterday. I ended up being at a different conference in Sydney. And unlimited food, no problem. But again, how do you serve it? If you pre-portion it, fantastic. You can save huge amounts of food waste. A cruise ship, cruise ships are known for out-of-control buffets. So a cruise ship company made a very simple change. They did not let people take the food, but they had a staff member pre-portion it. So if a guest comes in and says, I want, I don't know what, the lasagna, they got a portion of lasagna. And if the guest says, can I have another piece? The staff member said, no, I'm sorry, but you can come back and I will give you another piece later, right? Again, unlimited food. So we're not changing the service provision, but we are controlling this human greed in a situation where they've paid all-inclusive. And now they're trying every second of the day to extract the most value for money. So yeah, no, I'm not fond of these models. And I think these models can be slightly tweaked to still give the guest the same high level of service, but without the cost and the environmental cost associated.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Let's move on to question number 2. Says, do you believe that hotel chains have greater resources, knowledge to try to be more sustainable? Or maybe it's easier for them to teach their clients to be sustainable?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I mean, of course, the hotels should do it. Yeah, but the hotels are profit oriented. I mean, let's go one step further. If you would ask me what needs to happen, I would say government should regulate, right? Because look at little things. In Shanghai, in California, the government regulated that the single-use plastic shampoo bottles, cosmetics bottles are prohibited. It's a government regulation. So it's a good environmental outcome. And the hotel can blame the government. So if any hotel guest says, why don't I have a little shampoo? The hotel can say, well, I'd love to give it to you, but the government doesn't allow it, right? So I think it cascades down. If you want to really say because we are in an emergency here, right? In terms of climate change. So we need quick change. And the quickest change is for government to say, no, we're not doing this. No, we're not cleaning rooms every day. No, we're not doing this. The government could allow it by request, but not by default, right? So that would be number one. Number two would be that the hotels say, we understand the seriousness of the matter, we're going to act. Well, actually, the problem, why doesn't the government do it? They don't want to upset the hotels, right? Then you go to the hotel. Well, why doesn't the hotel it? Because they want to make profit. So every time they do something that they worry is going to affect guest satisfaction or anything, they're not going to do it, right? So that's why in my research, I focus on the tourist. But you're absolutely right. It is not solely the tourist's responsibility. It's a collective responsibility, yeah? The only reason I'm talking about the tourist because I have a very limited life. And so I ask myself, where can I achieve the maximum impact with my research, right? But the positive thing is more and more hotel chains are feeling the pressure. However, if I can be a bit cynical, many are not really doing much. Like they talk a lot, they measure a lot, but the action in terms of what they could do is actually quite minimal. But I think it'll get better. I think the pressure is increasing. So we will see more hotel-based initiatives as well.
Great. Let's move on then to question number 3. It says, should there be a different type of a strategy to be sustainable depending on the type of hotel is it? I think then an all-inclusive hotel doesn't have the same needs as an executive hotel.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Absolutely. And that's why when I said my experiments and actually all the experiments we as a tourism research community have conducted are fundamentally random, right? Because we go to one hotel and that hotel has very specific characteristics. So it's very hard for us to generalize. So absolutely. Business hotels, in fact, are the easiest target. Yeah, because these people are not there to maximize the pleasure. They're barely in the hotel anyway. So if you're a business hotel, there's a million things you can do that will have zero impact on the guest. All-inclusive hotels is something I'm not super familiar with because that's not a big thing in Australia. But I think that's a really hard one to crack because I imagine, I might be wrong, but I imagine that attracts a guest segment that is very much about value for money, right? So here you'd have to be really smart to see what can you do to still maintain the promise of all you can consume, use, whatever, but try to change defaults so that craziness is kind of controlled. But then there's also family hotels, right? Like there's different hotels. Family hotels, I think, would be a great target. You saw that whatever we measured, kids always cause a problem, right? So, but kids also love to play. So you could have a whole set of initiatives for family hotels that is fun and game-oriented, that gets the kids involved in doing the right behavior, right? So absolutely, I agree with you. Then we have, of course, the biggest challenge is the really little family-run hotels. Why are they a challenge? Because they can barely keep up making the beds. That is a tough life running a little hotel. So to go to a little hotel and say, now we're going to implement some great sustainability measures is very difficult proposition. So I could not agree more. There are so many different hotels. And now it's just hotels, but we could expand it to, boat tours, to destinations. The heterogeneity is absolutely huge. And I totally agree with you. We must account for heterogeneity to achieve the best outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let's move on to question number 4. The studies have obtained promising results in terms of cost and impact reduction. Why do you think there is resistance in the industry to adopting these practices forcefully?
This is such a wonderful question. I'm so happy you asked it because I just shake my head in disbelief. I mean, we have run some of these experiments where we have proven. One example is the serviettes, right? So we ran the serviette study. We proved to the director that it is cheaper, better for the environment, and the guests don't care. And the day we left, he went back to cotton serviettes. And he went back to cotton serviettes because in his head, his was a luxury hotel. That's what he had to do. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. And in fact, one of my PhD students is now trying to understand that. So we do not understand why there is such an uptake barrier of things that are proven to work among hotels. So yeah, I have no answer. I have no answer. I have hypotheses. I think for the small hotels, it's just a matter of time. So they're just too busy surviving the day to implement. For the bigger hotels, that's just anecdotal evidence. You know, we have hotels where we work with operation managers who are super keen, but then the general manager says, "Oh, well, that's a bad idea," and the idea is dead. So a lot might be internal organizational politics. But you are spot on. In fact, I will take the question a step further and I will say, look, we've got the tourists. Then we've got this big question, why don't the managers do stuff? We show them it saves cost and they still don't adopt it. And then the third thing nobody asked about yet, but I know someone will if we just wait long enough, is staff, right? That's also something we haven't been working on. But staff behavior has a gigantic impact on sustainability, because ultimately it's the cleaner who decides, am I changing the towel? How much water? I mean, we have anecdotal evidence. The cleaners come in and they just switch on the tap in the shower and it literally runs the whole time while they're vacuum cleaning, right? So staff behavior is another gigantic topic of investigation where we could achieve huge impact.
Absolutely. Let's see, I think we have time for another question. Do you think that sustainability strategies are more effective when they begin to be transmitted prior to the guest's arrival, or are they more efficient if they're only done upon the guest arrival?
Oh, that's another good question. Oh, I wish I could see all your faces because they're so good questions. That's another thing we're studying. So I don't know the answer. But here's my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that when you are at home, you are in a different mindset. You're not yet in this enjoyment mindset, right? You're still in the I'm a well-behaved citizen mindset. So yes, I believe I have no scientific evidence, but I believe that if we could move some of the key decisions to the booking stage, that would be super effective. Like, for example, you could say, would you like to book a room with a mini fridge or one without, right? So suddenly I've already solved the problem way in advance. And many people literally don't use it. So you could give them a minimal discount or, whatever. Absolutely, I think that's super powerful because my hypothesis is the moment they're in there, they are in enjoyment mode. I'm not talking business travel. I'm talking leisure travelers. They're in enjoyment mode. You're going to ask them to sacrifice enjoyment. They're saying, no, thanks, right? I'm here. I've paid $300 a night or 100 euros a night. And no, I'm not sacrificing my enjoyment. I'm going to max out on everything. So I think this is a brilliant strategy. Whatever we can elegantly push forward in decision-making to the point of booking where they're still at home, I think that's, as I said, we have one study trying to get at that, but it's not so easy to study. But I think it's a brilliant idea, absolutely.
Great. I think we have another question. The last question, it says, do you consider that these data you provided us can only be used by large hotel chains, or can they be used in the smaller and economy class hotels that are not chain hotels?
Absolutely can be used everywhere. Absolutely. In fact, our motivation was not to help the big hotels, frankly. Our motivation as researchers was, we know that in tourism, the vast majority of accommodation is small and medium enterprises. So most of the things you've seen today, you could very easily do in a small hotel. Yeah. A lot of the signage we're now developing for air conditioner use, for towel use, it's just a sign. The table signs you saw, right? These can just as well be implemented in any small hotel. And we are trying really hard to develop interventions that are super low cost, that do not come with ongoing staff involvement. See, the big hotel chains, they can afford that. Even if we go to the point of measurement, the big hotel chains just pay staff members to enter electricity data. Well, a small hotel can't do that, right? So even the automatic measurement is actually something that is much more beneficial for small hotels than it is for the big ones, because they can't be entering and monitoring their performance. So yes, absolutely applicable to small hotels.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Professor Dorlikar, y muchas gracias a todos por sus preguntas. Ahora continuaremos con el programa del Congreso, asistiendo a la primera ronda de sesiones paralelas en las que se presentarán diferentes comunicaciones. Cabe destacar, tal y como se especifica en el programa, que para esta primera ronda se desarrollarán 4 sesiones paralelas en diferentes aulas virtuales. Para acceder a estas salas, pueden seleccionar el aula al que deseen asistir en el menú inferior de su pantalla. Cuando finalicen las comunicaciones, regresaremos a esta sala principal para el café virtual. Nos vemos aquí al finalizar la primera ronda de sesiones.